Hi, everyone. Thanks for stopping by the Time We Discuss studio. Today I'm speaking with Dr. Holly Wendt, and it's time we discuss a career as a published author. Okay, so today I have Dr. Holly Wendt with me. Holly is a professor at a private university, and she is also an author. Holly, welcome to Time We Discuss.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you're here. I'm excited as well. I was actually just reviewing footage from one of the videos I did, I think about 10 days ago, and it was with a professor from a public university. So I'm very curious to hear how your experiences at a private university compare to hers at a public university. And then I also, you're an author, and I want to compare your experiences as an author to two other people I had that went down the self-published route. So I'm very curious to hear how that all works out. So that being said, let's start out with your work as a college professor.
Yeah.
Okay, so for starters, when I was speaking with her name was Dr. Cook. When I was speaking with Dr. Cook, she was saying that aside from lecturing, aside from teaching, she also advised students. She also was involved with service projects. What kinds of things are you doing aside from lecturing at a private university? What are your responsibilities there?
So the vast majority of it is teaching based. I'm also the director of creative writing at my college, so I'm helping to make sure the curriculum is up to date and advising students on independent study projects. I am also the advisor for the campus literary magazine and run our visiting writers series. And I think of those things as very much part of my teaching identity because those are co-curricular experiences to help students make connections and have basically a good time academically and socially while they're here. I also do the bulk of the advising for the creative writing students, and I'm also pretty heavily involved in on-campus and off-campus various kinds of committee work. So on campus, I am also part of the Global Education Committee, which is the best committee because we're encouraging students to study abroad. I actually will get to teach a 5-week seminar in Italy on creative nonfiction writing this May. Super excited about that. I am also the advisor for several student clubs, including our LGBTQ student group and the literary magazine. And then campus service, I do a lot of work with our diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging initiatives. We do departmental assessment, which sounds like so much fun. I have my hands in all parts of the campus. And then off campus, I am also the vice president of the Anvil Free Library Board and trying to really champion public libraries in our community.
That's awesome. That is a lot of stuff.
Yes.
And I want to come back to the international stuff, but I did remember the other thing I wanted to talk about was Dr. Cook also said she was involved with research. Now, at her particular university, it's an R2 school. Admittedly, I don't know a whole lot about the classifications. At your university, are you required to do a certain amount of research? What's that like in the private school world?
We are a small liberal arts college, again, mostly residential, mostly with traditional age college students. So there is a lot of emphasis placed on your teaching and service as it pertains to individual students and making sure they're having a quality experience. But we do still have research expectations as part of tenure and promotion. For me, that has looked like doing critical articles. I have a couple of publications related to my work as a medievalist. I also teach sports literature at my college, and so I'm also an active sports writer. I wrote 2 years for Baseball Prospectus pretty much on a weekly basis, so making sure that those things are happening. And I'm also a creative writer, so that includes creative publications. In my case, it's primarily fiction. I published my first novel this year, and short fiction, essays, and then being a good literary citizen who is involved professionally. Right now, I'm also teaching some external workshops, bolster my teaching skills, and also show that I have relevant academic credentials in my area that is also part of the professional development experience.
So before you're talking about international travel, how easy and or common is it for a university professor to teach abroad as part of their curriculum?
At my institution, we do not tend to send faculty on the semester-long programs. They used to do that, but now faculty often lead short-term study abroad programs. So that might include spring break trips. Right now, one of our athletic training faculty members actually just got on a plane with a handful of athletic training students. They're going to Northern Ireland to interact with folks there and see different training environments and what the facilities are like, what the training and credentialing process is like. And those are embedded within a course. We have, I think, 5 different short-term programs happening this summer. So I'm leading a trip to Italy. We have business and political science, I think, doing a program in the Netherlands. We have music going to Scotland, and a couple more. We try to have a rotating set of offerings, not usually more than 5 of those at the end of the spring semester. But yeah, we also try to rotate programs and faculty. So I will not do the Italy program year after year after year. At most, it would be every other. And then we rotate the Italy program with another department.
Now, do you have the opportunity to go to, and obviously this is like specific to your institution, everywhere is going to be different, but do you have the opportunity to go to different places, or is it more of like if you're part of the music department, you typically only go to, you know, these 3 locations or something like that?
We tend to have partnerships with other institutions. So my program, we will actually partner with the Umbra Institute in Perugia, Italy. We do tend to have some affinity with particular locations. So the humanities partners really well with the Umbra Institute. Our Maastricht program, it is really, really intensely focused on business and human rights. If faculty wanted to propose a new program in a new place, they are free to do that. We work with our global education coordinator, who is amazing. And so one of my colleagues in visual arts put together a program in Barcelona, Spain. So if you're willing to put in the work to help arrange a program, there's always opportunities to do that.
Switching gears slightly, working at your university, and I'm hoping you can speak to private universities in general, but specifically your university. In order to teach as a professor, do you need to have your doctorate? Do you need to have the terminal degree in your field? What does that typically look like?
Doctorate and or terminal degree in the field are the basic requirements. We do have some clinical educators where the terminal degree is not a PhD, and that's, you know, whatever is appropriate in that field. For example, in my specific field, creative writing, the technical terminal degree for creative writers is a Master of Fine Arts, but I have the master's and PhD combo because I also wanted to make sure that I could teach literature. And so I went to a graduate institution that would let me do a creative dissertation in addition to all the literature work. So either of those will work. At a small liberal arts college, really the priority is on teaching. And so it's not absolutely necessary to enter with teaching experience, but it certainly helps. So if you are interested in that path, I would recommend when you go to graduate school, go to a place that will allow you to do a teaching assistantship as part of your graduate study.
And sticking with that for just one more second before we
Sure.
switch over to your authorship, if someone's looking to change careers and they're looking to get into the teaching field at the college level, it sounds like if they have work experience, relevant experience, they have the passion for teaching, it sounds like at a liberal arts school, they might be able to kind of squeeze their way in and go the teaching route there.
Particularly at the adjunct level, so looking at 1 class or 2 classes in a particularly specific field. I know, for example, in our criminal justice program, for example, we have folks who are either retired from legal-related careers who are coming in to do specialty courses. We also have that in our digital communications field. So folks with extensive photography and videography videography work might teach that specific course. I don't want to be discouraging, but it is really, really difficult to break into higher education full-time, and that is everywhere.
So let's talk about your book. You said this was your first novel. Is that what you said before?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I will preface that with first published novel. Every novelist has more novels than they have published. This is the name of the game.
So your first published novel.
Yes.
Walk me through that process. What was that like? Let's start with what was your inspiration for it, and I guess in a nutshell, what's it about?
Okay, I'll start with the preface of the book, and that will lead me to the inspiration. So the book is called Heading North, and it tracks a season in which a queer closeted ice hockey player rebuilds his life in the NHL after losing his secret boyfriend and entire former team in a catastrophic plane crash. It was inspired by the real life 2011 Lokomotiv Yaroslav air disaster, in which an entire Russian professional ice hockey team was killed in a plane crash. I am a huge sports fan. I love ice hockey, and I was perplexed at the lack of literary fiction about ice hockey. Baseball has so many beautiful novels. Like, you turn a corner, you will find a beautiful baseball novel. And there just are not the same number of those in ice hockey. And I think the conversation about LGBTQ issues in professional sports is important and pressing. And I was like, well, I wish to write this book. I wish to read this book mostly, and then started writing it. And it's been a long journey. I started this draft in 2012. It is now 2024. It came out in November of 2023. And so the writing process, writing, revision, and then the actual journey to publication was 11 years.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
I couldn't even have guessed that such a journey would be that long. Other people I spoke to, they have gone the self-publish route. It sounds like you actually went through an actual publisher. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did you explore the self-publish route at all, or how did that all unfold? How did the publishing itself unfold?
Because I am also an academic, publishing work is part of my job. Self-publishing was never really on the table for me because those things will not be counted toward tenure and promotion in my field. I will also say that by inclination, I am very hesitant to market myself. And if you self-publish, I'm sure your guest mentioned, like, there is a lot of promotion and marketing, and that's all on you unless you hire someone, which you can do. And I just knew that I did not want to do that for myself. So I pursued traditional publishing, which was its own long road. I queried agents for about 2 years with this book. I did not get an agent because it is a novel that straddles a lot of different kind of audience segments. It's very much a sports book. It is very much an LGBTQ book. It is very literary in its style. And they're like, I don't know what audience that is. One agent was like, I really like this book, but I think it's a small press book. And so then I started submitting the manuscript to small presses and was very delighted to have Braddock Avenue Books pick it up, because they had also put out some books that I really admire. I went that route, but it was very, very long. I submitted the manuscript in 2019, and then we all know what happened in 2020. And so I didn't actually hear back that the publisher was interested until 2022. So it was under consideration for 3 years.
What was that part of it like? Was there like a web portal you could log into? It's like, nope, still pending, or is it just like they ghosted you essentially?
They do accept their submissions through an online submission portal called Submittable. And yep, it just says in progress. After about 10 months, I did email the editor of the press and say, like, hi, just checking in. And they're like, yep, this is still actively under consideration. Sorry for the delay. But it's also a press that is staffed by a number of educators. And all of us were in just like mad panic scramble to move everything online and try to navigate that whole thing. So it's like, I understand. We'll just hang out.
I'm going to preface this by saying I don't want to ask specifics, but I think about, when I think of someone getting published, I think about you get like pick a number, $1 million advance, a $10,000, whatever that is. Does that ever, from your experience, do the advances ever happen with a first book, or is it you have to kind of prove yourself and then you may get an advance? What does that look like?
So in the broader publishing world, first book advances absolutely do happen. How it happens is frankly mysterious. You really just have to have the right kind of alchemical connection between your manuscript and an editor and someone who has such strong feelings about it that they're willing to take it to the big board of people at the publishing house and say, we must have this. But yes, that happens not infrequently, that publishers will take a big old gamble on someone and offer up a really nice advance. The difficulty is for anyone who's hearing those exciting figures, because sometimes they make the news, is that advance is usually split up across 3, maybe 4 payments over the journey of publication, which means that even if you get, I'm just going to use $100,000 advance, that means you might only be getting 33,000 of that before taxes, before your agent takes their cut, which is usually 15%. I think a lot of people forget that that's spread out over quite a long period of time. Usually one third on signing, 1/3 on manuscript, maybe first edits, and then maybe 1 at final manuscript submitted. And it's usually at least 18 months between this book is signed to a contract for publication and it actually coming out.
So another question for you on this. I know the music industry, if it doesn't still work this way, it used to work this way, where it's same idea. You get, you know, you might get a five album deal. It's $100 million, whatever it is. But usually that money up front is then used to finance everything associated with that album. It'll include your tour. It'll include studio musicians, studio time, all that stuff. And you don't see a penny of the royalties until that money is recouped by the record label. Does the same principle happen with writing, that you essentially they're basically lending you the money at a 0% interest rate, and then they get reimbursed through the royalties? Once they're reimbursed, then you start to see royalty money. Does it work the same way? How does that work?
It's very similar. Usually the author doesn't have additional costs to lay out of their advance. That's essentially like your paycheck for writing the book. But yes, if you have been given an advance, you do not see any royalties until you earn back the amount of your advance, which can actually really backfire. If you get a big advance and you don't earn out, you don't get another big advance like that. It's probably more advantageous for the longevity of a career to get a modest starting point that you can earn out and then start to see royalties as you go forward in your career. I was lucky that with my press, I had a lot of say in what my book was going to look like. If you publish with a very large house, the author usually doesn't get to have much of a say unless you're very famous.
How about from running a little short on time. From an editing perspective, did you work with like a team of editors? Did you work with one editor from beginning to end? What did that look like with yours, with the publishing company you worked with?
I worked with one editor from beginning to end, and then the copy editor, who's a separate person. But yep, one person, and it was really, really nice, very supportive, very easy, frankly. Again, I had a lot of freedom to make the choices that I wanted to make about freshening up sentences. I just got a couple of good questions to help me clarify some things, and on we went.
And where can we find your book?
You can find my book at the Braddock Avenue Books website, braddockavenuebooks.com, or of course at Amazon or your local independent bookseller.
I love that. And then I'll make sure that I put links to those in the description of the show. So I have 2 more things for you. Yeah. So the first one is a surprise question. It has nothing to do with the person's job. I'd love to throw these at the person I'm speaking with. It's always a really, really good time. Being in the United States, traveling to different parts of the world can be challenging, especially when we're crossing hemispheres. I want you to think about somewhere that you've always wanted to visit, but now that you're older, you realize you'll probably never get there. What would that place be?
Oh, I don't want to say I might never get there because I'm still holding out hope, but New Zealand, that's the dream location, New Zealand.
New Zealand is a beautiful place. I would love to go there, but it is too, I think for me, it's probably too far to fly there. On another segment, I talked about, my cap is about 5-6 hours, and then it's actually more like 3 or 4, and that's like I really want to get off the plane. But longest flight I've been is like 5-6 hours. So New Zealand, I hope you make it there, Holly. I do. Yeah. Typically, when I bring a guest on, I like to give them about a minute or 2 to talk about a project or a cause or something that they believe in. So if there's something you'd like to talk about, I'll give you the floor to discuss.
I will discuss patronizing your local public libraries. I grew up in a place where we didn't have one. I was a grown person before I really went to a public library, and they're remarkable institutions. I said before, I am part of our local library board, and one of the great benefits of that that work is seeing people actually understand what all the library can do for them, including public education classes that are free, research support. I know a lot of folks really like the ancestry.com thing, and so we have a whole like free class to help people learn how to do that and support in the space for using that technology. Libraries can lend items. Ours lends ukuleles. How great that is. Some libraries lend sewing machines and power tools and cake pans and all kinds of things. So it's not just a place to read books silently. My library is in the middle, nearing the end of a massive renovation project, and we are building in a new a maker space where we'll have technology and support to use that technology so that folks who don't want to buy their own 3D printers or laser cutters might have a chance to see what those are like.
Holly, that is amazing. I had no idea that libraries could have those things.
And if you're excited about your favorite new author's new book, but you're a little short on cash, you can always request that your library get that book and add it to their collection. So that's a great way to support the authors in your life as well.
That is awesome. Holly, thank you so much for sharing that information. Thank you for being part of Time We Discuss today.
It was a delight. Thanks so much.
Thanks for popping in the studio. My name is Dan, and this is Time We Discuss. I really enjoyed speaking with Holly today. If you want to learn more about Holly and her published book, follow the links in the description. If there's a profession that you want me to cover, add a comment, and I'll find that person for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. That'll do it. See you next time on Time We Discuss.